Hello and welcome to MovieTown, the Los Angeles Revival Cinema Scene show. It is October, and so the question I must ask is, do you like horror movies? Because we are going to be talking about a lot of them exclusively. I actually just went out. Joining me in the studio is The Creepers. Just picked up this VHS from Whammy. Wanted to have something thematic going for us, but let's just jump right in to the movies. The calendar that jumped out the most to me this month has to be Video Archive's Cinema Club, the 20-seat micro cinema inside the Vista, movies on VHS, DVD, 16 millimeter, and their schedule this month is just, it's both got everything you'd want and the unexpected, some favorites, and so I want to start there because they've also programmed it thematically by day. So their Tuesday, Wednesday matinees are one thing, their Thursday, Friday evening shows another. So their Tuesdays, to start off, are gateway horror. And this is actually a term I hadn't really heard used before, but kind of understood it right away of, maybe PG-13 rated movies that are horror that you might have seen as a kid without being too overwhelming, but they still stuck in you enough and were scary enough to still think about many years later and put you on the track of liking horror movies. So for these Tuesday gateway horrors, they start with Something Wicked This Way Comes, with The Black Cauldron, and then the one that really jumped out to me was Lady in White, the 1988 Frank LaLoggia film. And a lot of it is just the poster and cover for this movie, just sends chills down me even to this day of how scared I was to watch this movie because I had heard it was so scary, and finally a friend and I rented it for a sleepover and it didn't disappoint. And I don't know that I've seen it since those years when it would have been renting it or would have been maybe on cable in those years afterwards. So very excited to see that one. And then Wednesdays are a bit more of a potpourri, a lot like anything from heavy metal horror movies to kind of sex comedy horror. And the one I'm highlighting here is called Evil Laugh from 1986, director Dominick Brascia. And this is med school student friends go out to spend a weekend at a house, of course, and it's the site of some notorious killings many years ago by a serial killer. And so, of course, some killings and sex and comedy happen in this. And then moving into the evening showings, Thursday evenings are reserved for Hammer double features. So the British Hammer studio, which I really have not seen a lot of these, and so I really like the idea of being able to see a few of these. And the one that jumped out to me, The Curse of Frankenstein and Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. The titles just feel so good. It's you don't know if it's the second, if it's the sequel or third movie in a Frankenstein series or the 15th. So I put that one down. And then Fridays they're doing is anthology night, horror anthology night. So I featured the final night in that, Halloween night, October 31st. They are showing a secret horror anthology triple feature on VHS, which sounds very fun. And then Saturdays are reserved for director double features. They've got a Tom Holland one, a Fright Night and Psycho 2. So check all those out. Moving into Cinematic Void at the American Cinematheque. Their movies pretty much could almost, their schedule the whole year could play in October and fit fine. But this one I'm highlighting, Messiah of Evil, 1974, director William Huck, because this is the same director who did Howard the Duck, which I saw this summer during the American Cinematheque 70 millimeter festival. And Jim Branscombe, who is behind Cinematic Void, did the Q&A with director William Huck during this, and he brought up to William that one of his favorite horror movies is Messiah of Evil, and so I'd never heard of it, so kind of put it in the mind, and then lo and behold, it's on the calendar this 4 or 5 months later. So very excited to kind of check this out and see what it is. And now jumping to the Frida Cinema, which is just loaded with all sorts of, pretty much everything you'd want: giallo, arty horror, classic Hollywood horror, Japanese horror. So the one that, really jumped out for me that they're showing for 5 nights straight is the Italian Lucio Fulci movie from 1984, Murder Rock, which I've heard described as Saturday Night Fever, but as if everyone didn't stay alive, and very like Eurotrash disco rock. Sounds very fun. The other one I highlighted here in the middle of the month, October 13th, The Keep. This is Michael Mann's second film from 1983, and it's like a really interesting Nazi World War II horror where this like battalion or group of Nazi soldiers is taking over this like tomb in the mountains, and they're looking for a very powerful sort of talisman sort of thing, kind of like that we see in Indiana Jones. But the tone and atmosphere of this is just so good. And then I wanted to highlight a classic Hollywood screening here of Jacques Tournay's Cat People and Leopard Man, kind of a nice pairing of a woman becoming a cat, quite literally, and the other man who turns into a leopard, quite literally. So Videotheque took a few months hiatus during the summer, but they're back for October, and I thought their schedule was really good. So jumping straight into that, this one I'm going to hit up for sure, October 10th, the made-for-TV British horror film Ghost Watch from 1992. And I haven't really known too much about this. I've heard that it's like this kind of rarely seen, very scary for being a made-for-TV movie, and sort of notoriously was pulled from TV because people found it too scary when it was airing in the 90s. And so very interested to see that. And it's being paired with something which is quite a different tone from the 90s. Ghost Watch is Fellini's really horror entry in the horror anthology Spirits of the Dead, and they're showing standalone his section, Toby Dammit, which stars Terence Stamp. And if you don't know this or haven't seen it, it is absolutely fantastic and really kind of makes you pine for a full Fellini horror film that we never got. And going further with Videotheque, they've got the 1998 Elvira, Mistress of the Dark feature. And then on Halloween night, they're showing Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. So if you like the Halloween movies and don't have something to do, that's a pretty good option. And then moving on to the Eastwood. So another giallo little mini fest here, a triple feature of giallo films from 1972. I don't know any of these, but there's been very few giallo movies that I haven't enjoyed watching, especially with a crowd. And so this is Who Saw Her Die, Knife of Ice, and My Dear Killer. And then one of my favorite series here at the Eastwood, Hong Kong Cinema Club, isn't taking the month off just because it's horror. And so they're bringing one of the first kung fu horror movies from Hong Kong, Mr. Vampire from 1985. And this looks awesome. So very excited for those. And then Vidiots has a bunch of stuff. I'm highlighting just 2 of them here. Of course, Wes Craven may be the most programmed director during October, or certainly there could be a case made for him. And so his 1991 movie that's, probably screened a bit less, The People Under the Stairs, which I think will still like really thrill people who haven't seen it or people going back to see it again. And then the next one, October 25th, I think this is, one of the standouts, if not the standout event of October, Poltergeist on 35 millimeter. Of course, the seminal film from 1982, director Tobe Hooper, Steven Spielberg produced. The chance to see this on 35 with a full crowd on a Saturday night at the Vista is pretty special for October. And so moving on to New Beverly, of course, is loaded, but I really wanted to highlight specifically a couple midnight titles because I think this is one of my favorite places to see midnight movies, and they're, surely not disappointing this season. So they're showing this movie I've seen a lot on revival calendars, but I've never actually seen it. Fade to Black, the 1980 Vernon Zimmerman movie, and I think it gets screened a lot. It's sort of an early meta. It's about a horror-obsessed kid who finds himself in horror circumstances and is supposed to be really fun. And so I would be excited to see that one. And then the other one they're showing 5 times this month on Friday nights is From Dusk Till Dawn. And so I think that would just be really fun to revisit, especially there. And so moving on to Brain Dead is actually, their spotlight this month is David Cronenberg, of course, known most specifically for body horror. Movies which I would really place more in kind of science fiction than horror to start, but it does have that crossover with the crazy prosthetics and gore that everyone knows from his films. And so to highlight one of those, I'm highlighting The Fly, his remake from 1986 with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. And this is one of my favorite movies of his that I feel like, gets overshadowed a bit by Videodrome and Shivers and some of the other kind of more direct from the brain of David Cronenberg. But I really like this remake and think it'll play great. And then this one just jumped out as being very fun. Leprechaun in the Hood from 2000, director Rob Spira. Of course, the great Leprechaun character finds himself in the hood. Sounds pretty good. So moving on to Philosophical Research Society and Seventh House screenings. They have a great series this month. Every Thursday night, it's called Eternal Darkness, A Century of Nosferatu. And so every Thursday night they're showing a different version of Nosferatu on screen. And so they're starting with actually not the original, but the 1997 Herzog version starring Klaus Kinski. Very fun. And then they move to the next Thursday, they do the most recent one, Robert Eggers' take on it from last year. And then this is probably my favorite one that they have is on October 23rd, Shadow of the Vampire. This is a behind the scenes story of the making of the original Nosferatu in 1921 or 22 when it was ever made, directed by F.W. Murnau, with Willem Dafoe plays the actor playing the vampire, and he may or may not be a real vampire. And John Malkovich is just so awesome as F.W. Murnau in this. So that one really jumps out. And then they're showing the original with a live score that I'll highlight in my kind of very specific spooky season recs. And so I'm gonna go next to Whammy, which I really featured a lot in September because they had the incredible series Shot on Video September, which featured, was probably 2/3 horror, like low budget, micro budget horror shot on video. And so I kind of expected them to maybe take things a little easy this month, but they have just a fantastic schedule. This first one, Skin Deep from 2004, director Gabriel Bartalos. He's known as a very famous effects person, and this was his directorial debut. And I saw the trailer for this the last night of Shot on Video September, and it looked just wacko, insane, crazy kind of homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with a lot more comedy built in. And then this one I had to put on here, both just for the title and the description, Criminally Insane from 1975, director Nick Millard. And this movie, the log line is a very obese woman starts killing the people who keep telling her she needs to eat less. So I just really like the sound of that. And then they're showing towards the end of the month on the 25th, Body Melt from 1993, director Philip Brophy on VHS. So I always like highlighting one of their VHS screenings. And then moving to another video store, Cinephile. They've had just great calendars the last few months, and October is equally great. So I want to first highlight Sleepwalkers from 1992, director Mick Garrison, who will be in person for this screening. And this is written by Stephen King, and it's very much kind of a reimagining of Cat People, the Jacques Tourneur film, but much kind of like in a much higher, like erotic version, Oedipal nightmare sort of thing that really made an impact on me when I was 13 when I saw this. And then the next one is they're actually showing a movie in 3D in their micro cinema on a Blu-ray 3D. So I'm really interested to see what that experience is like. And it's the 1982 film Parasite, of course not to be confused with the Best Picture Bong Joon-ho film of a few years ago. So I don't know if what kind of glasses you have to wear for this, but excited to find out. Alamo Drafthouse has some good horror stuff. I wanted to highlight it because I've talked a little bit about horror anthologies and even highlighted some. But this one, Creepshow from 1982, director George A. Romero, written by Stephen King, who wrote this and also stars in probably my favorite chapter of a man versus flora story. Very unique. But this is my favorite horror anthology. And it even, gave rise both to a TV show called Tales from the Dark Side and then Tales from the Crypt, which was really one of my favorite horror things growing up. Old Town Music Hall has turned into Old Town Music Haunts for the month. And so they have tons of live scores, which with silent films, which I'll go over in my spooky season episode. But I wanted to highlight just a very fun one, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein from 1948. Abbott and Costello sort of did these really kind of early comedy horrors that would go on to become, what we think of now as kind of the much bigger comedy horror genre. And so Gardena has like one of the best double features, I think, of the month. October 10th, they're showing Frankenhooker and Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. So a double horror hooker feature. Sounds like a can't miss. The New Art has a series called Creature Features 2. And this is because they had last year a series called Creature Features. And now they're just showing the sequels to many of those movies. And so the one that jumped out to me was Child's Play 2, 1990. I'm just a huge Chucky fan. The original Child's Play means so much to me. And so getting to revisit Child's Play 2 would be fantastic. The Academy Museum has a much, definitely not dedicated to horror month, but they spotlight some fun horror. And this one I wanted to spotlight because director Karen Kusama and Megan Fox are going to be there for this screening of Jennifer's Body from 2009. This is, of course, writer Diablo Cody's follow-up to Juno that got a lot of attention and was kind of had both huge fans and huge detractors. I remember when this movie came out, but I mean, it kind of blends so many different genres, and I just really enjoyed so much of this, even if it doesn't fully hold up. So I wanted to throw it out there. And then at 2220 Arts and Archives, Cathode Cinema has a very no budget, gritty French horror double feature from the 80s. I don't know either of these movies. Folles Mutières in Ogroff, the Mad Mutilator. Supposed to be pretty hardcore stuff. It sounds very good. And then this last one's a new micro cinema that I've seen and people have been telling me about. Killer Fitness in Burbank, which when I first heard about it, I thought it was sort of a fitness theme horror movie house, but it's actually a gym that also shows movies a few nights a month and turns into a micro cinema. So this one, October 12th, is showing Trick or Treat from 1986. This is not to be confused with the 2007 horror anthology that's become really popular and shows a lot, Trick or Treat. This is Trick or Treat, an entry into the hard rock, hair metal, 80s horror subgenre, which I think should play very well at Killer Fitness. And so that covers kind of the straight horror recs for the month. I'm going to jump into a really special episode of spooky season screenings and events next. So watch that one and enjoy the horror month.